In 1839, two of the most powerful nations on Earth raised an army of 25,000 men and fired exactly 0 shots. This is the story of the most expensive border argument in history. A war where nobody fought.
The trouble started with a map drawn in 1783. When the American Revolution ended, Britain and the brand new United States signed the Treaty of Paris. The negotiators were tired, they were in a hurry, and they had to draw a border through the wilderness of what is now Maine and Canada. So they described it in words. Vague, hopeful, very confident words. The border would follow some highlands and then a river.
Now, why does any of this matter? Money!
Specifically, trees. This disputed stretch of forest, called Aroostook, was full of ancient pine, the best shipbuilding lumber in North America. Loggers from Maine and lumbermen from New Brunswick moved into the same woods. Each side swore the trees were theirs. Each side started cutting, and cutting more. Arrests started happening. Snowballs turned into prisoners, and prisoners turned into something bigger. Because the dispute over trees was about to become a dispute over a flag. In July of 1827, an American settler named John Baker decided to make a statement. He raised a homemade American flag over his claim on the disputed bank of the St. John River. The flag was sewn by his wife, a thing of glory, stars, stripes, probably a little wonky. New Brunswick was not amused. They arrested John Baker, threw him in jail, and fined him 25 pounds. Serious money back then. He stayed locked up until he paid. So, one man, a wife's hand-sewn flag, and a jail cell. That was strike one. The border war was now personal. So both countries tried the grown-up thing. Arbitration. They asked the King of the Netherlands, William I, to look at the original treaty and draw the border. Now picture this, a king in a country that is literally below sea level being asked to settle a feud over a frozen swamp on the other side of the Atlantic? He studied the 1783 wording, he studied the maps, and he declared the treaty, I quote, inexplicable and impractical. Then he did what kings do. He drew his own compromise line right down the middle. America said no, Britain said no. The king shrugged, the line died, and the argument rumbled on for another decade.
And rumbled it did. Through the 1830s, the border became a low-grade war over timber. British lumbermen seized American oxen and horses because apparently livestock was on the table. Americans returned the favor. Arrests piled up on both sides, each one a fresh headline in the local papers. Then, in 1837, Maine sent its land agent to the Aroostook River to run the territory Maine's way. New Brunswick lumbermen were not thrilled. Not thrilled is an understatement. A group of New Brunswick lumbermen, furious about their seized oxen and horses, broke into the government arsenal at Woodstock. They helped themselves to the weapons. Then they raided the American camp at night and arrested the land agent in his chains in the dark. It was officially a kidnapping. Diplomatically, it was a disaster. And back in Maine, people were reaching for their muskets. Now it was personal, and Maine had had enough. The governor declared the territory in danger and called out the militia. Not a few hundred, about 10,000 men armed and ready to march into the disputed woods. Meanwhile, Washington dithered. President Martin Van Buren hesitated, then sent General Winfield Scott to keep the peace. And the money. Oh, the money. Maine had already voted $800,000 for defense. Congress went bigger. It gave the president authority to call up 50,000 men and spend $10 million. $10 million. It was the largest military buildup North America had seen since the Revolution. And almost none of it ever fired a weapon.
Britain, for its part, was not about to be out-mobilized. New Brunswick and British regulars swelled the force on the other side to around 15,000 men. So in the freezing winter of 1839, two armies faced each other across the Aroostook River. 10,000 Mainers, 15,000 British, every officer waiting for the other to blink. Then came the war's great battle. In the spring of 1839, a party of New Brunswick men crossed the river, squared off against the Americans, and after some extremely tense shouting, marched right back to their camp. For breakfast. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was captured. The Mainers declared it a victory and called it the Battle of Caribou, which is a little like calling a traffic jam a siege. Enter General Winfield Scott, the man Washington sent to fix the whole thing. He walked into the middle of the standoff and did what adults do at a border argument. He met the British governor, they shook hands, and agreed that freezing in a swamp over trees was a waste of everyone's Sunday. Both armies packed up and went home. No treaty, no surrender. The war just ended. Officially, it took 3 more years to finish. In 1842, Daniel Webster and Lord Ashburton sat down and hammered out the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Maine and Massachusetts each walked away with $150,000. The border finally got a line. But here's the best part. Each side brought a secret map to the negotiations. The Americans had a map allegedly marked by Benjamin Franklin that proved the British claim was correct. The British had a map that proved the American claim was correct. Both sides, in secret, were holding the evidence that would have handed the victory to the enemy. And both sides, very politely, decided to never mention it. To this day, historians love this part because it means the border you see on the map was settled by 2 men pretending not to know that they were both wrong. So what do we call this whole mess? Officially, the Aroostook War. Affectionately, the Pork and Beans War, after the rations the militia lived on. Historians love to argue about what to even call it. A war, an incident, a very expensive misunderstanding. Either way, the numbers are almost unbelievable. 25,000 men mobilized, millions of dollars spent, 6 decades of bickering. And the final tally of lives lost in combat? 0. 38 men died, but of accident and disease, not the enemy. 2 nations, 1 border, no bullets. So next time someone tells you that wars are big and inevitable and worth it, remember the Aroostook War. 2 great powers, 25,000 soldiers, and the most expensive argument in North American history. Settled because a couple of diplomats and one very confused Dutch king decided the whole thing was ridiculous. If you enjoyed this, tell me in the comments, what's the most ridiculous war you know? And subscribe, because history is full of these. Nobody fought, but everybody watched.